thing that I asked
honestly,
last week. Yeah.
yeah, it's not really too much. You know, them signing Fehoko, like if they're gonna take a defensive tackle, I at this point in the draft process, I don't see them taking a defensive tackle until probably round 3 or 4 at the earliest. And so I don't think it really changes my mindset on it. I still think if there's a guy that they like, they'll take him there. But I'm more so looking at like some of the earlier guys. Like it doesn't really affect how I think that the Steelers draft is going to go. And with signing Keanu Neal, I mean, what? The Steelers are no longer going to take like Jordan Battle. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like safeties that emulate like that type of safety,
Right.
because you can't say like, oh, like Brian Branch or any other like typical
Jair
like
Brown
free
maybe out of
safety.
Penn State. I think that might take him off the board.
Yeah,
But
like you have to like Jair Brown, Jordan Battle, these guys that are more like run heavy stopping safeties. I feel like that affects them in the draft process, but anything else, it doesn't really affect any of the free safeties that could be taking like a Brian Branch. But I don't think the Steelers are really going to take one anyway because they have Minka. I think they're more focused on corner in the secondary, so I don't really think it affects it anyway.
yeah, but the thing with Branch to me is like that's also a slot corner. So like I think that's why he might still be in play. I wouldn't think it would be at 17. I think he would have to be the case of like a lot of people well connected to the league do not have Branch in the first round anymore because of the way that he tested. If that happens, one, that's crazy to me, especially in this class. I think he's a top 10 player. Top 15, I might give you, but for sure he should go in the first round. But if he's there at 32, if the Steelers take somebody else, it's going to break my heart. I would 100% take him there, even though you're going to list him as a safety. That's your slot corner, in my opinion. Another guy's like Jatavius Martin out of Illinois, who I really like too. But the reason I asked about the draft stuff and wanted to include that for sure and made sure we had a conversation, Alex Kazor at Steelers Depot does this as well as anybody else, keeping track of pre-draft visits. The Steelers are up to 21 of their 30 used. And the most interesting thing to me is that there's been more in like interior offensive linemen than tackles that are coming in for pre-draft visits. Osiris Torrance, Steve Avila, Chandler Zavala, John Michael Schmitz, Cody Mock. All 5 of those guys have been in for pre-draft visits. When you talk about the tackles, it's only been DeJuan Jones and Anton Harrison. Either already visited or scheduled to visit. I should say that too, because not all of them have happened, but we know that they're going to happen. But yeah, so it's interesting to me there. Also, like we're talking about corners. 6 corners so far have come in, 2 safeties. None of the high end safeties, to your point, have been in. It's been Daniel Scott and Tanner Engel. But yeah, I think looking at this list right now, to me, what jumps off the page is what we already knew. Corner is very much in play at 17. And if it's going to be a tackle, it's probably going to be like a massive man like DeJuan Jones. To me, one of the 2 players, along with, say what you want about him, Keely Ringo. To me, DeJuan Jones and Keely Ringo are the 2 players they've shown the most interest in from start to finish so far.
Yeah. I think that their visits kind of speak to what they're interested in. It is interesting, though, that they haven't really met with any of the other tackles in the class. Like you said, they met with a lot of interior offensive linemen, which you look at how the Steelers have improved their offensive line this offseason so far, you wonder why they're looking at so many interior offensive linemen still. Obviously, I know you want to improve it upon it, but that is interesting to me, considering that tackle is the more needy position right now. And I know that
it's got to be a guy that's center capable. And I like Mason Cole, but I could understand if you're looking for either an upgrade or something down the line, because Mason Cole's contract, obviously like 2 years left, but you can get out of it like after next year pretty easily. So, but yeah, I just want to throw that in there.
No, yeah, and that's a good point. And I think that the thing about tackles, Anton Harrison, DeJuan Jones, those 2 aren't surprising that the Steelers are meeting with. And I think the reason that haven't met and they're not going to meet with like a Paris Johnson Jr. or a Broderick Jones is the Steelers are probably accepting that those 2 aren't going to be there for them to take. I think that that's right, but it is interesting, like that. I think that they should have like talked to more of the tackles around like the second round range as well, because there's other tackles that could be viable options somewhere in there. It's
Mhm.
interesting to me though that they're not, and they're meeting with just the two. Now they very well might get one of those guys at 17, or at 32. I don't know. I would love
Yeah.
to get one of them at 32 and pick a corner in round 1, but that's just my bias. But
Mhm. I want to add too, though. So we always like to connect the dots in terms of like interest show, like reveals the Steelers cards where they go in the first round. So that is absolutely the case for where Tomlin and Khan go for like pro days and stuff like that. These visits have actually been more revealing for what they do on day 2. So this might be something to look at for picks 32, 49, and 80, and so on and so forth down the line, as opposed to pick 17. I'm not so sure that pick 17's on here in these pre-draft visits, but I bet you on day 2, we see a couple of these guys, or assuming that they're available.
Well, I've just seen some people do mock drafts and have like the Steelers taking DeJuan Jones at 17, which I think is a bit rich. I think that you could hold off to 32. I understand why they could. They really want the big tackle. I know the Steelers really like that, and they wouldn't want to risk losing
totally
him.
along with what they did in free agency.
Yeah, and I don't think they may not want to take the risk to lose him waiting until 32, but still, I still think that could be a little rich for him at 17.
Takes 2 to tango, but man, if you can move back from 17, pick up an extra day 2 pick, and then get DeJuan Jones, like, sign me up for that. I love DeJuan Jones as a player.
Yeah,
for sure.
He's a mountain.
Yeah, and he's a good athlete at that size. Like, it's stupid how I don't know what these, like, I say kids because they're younger than us, drank and eat growing up now, but like freak athletes regardless of the size.
It's true.
But yeah, some other ones that like kind of jumped off to me, because just as we were talking about the defensive line, we're starting to see some of those guys come in. Javon Dexter, Keanu Benton, who's really rising up boards. Thule, I don't even know how to say this guy's last name. I don't want to butcher this. From USC, I don't know if you know how to say this, being that you were on the West Coast for a little bit there.
Hold on.
Thule Tuipulotu.
Tuli Tuipulotu.
Yeah, him out of USC. And then Siaki Ika was actually in today at the time of recording this. He's a guy.
I already saw what you said about him.
Yeah. So here's the thing. And
for anybody who didn't, it's just one word. It just said no.
Did you see my response though when somebody asked like why?
Because he's a 2-down tackle.
Yeah. Who if he goes in the top 50. Now, if you're talking about from any like say he falls to, I mean, I've seen him falling in a lot of drafts now. Say he falls to like 80, no problem with that. Or if you're moving back from 32 or 49 and it's like lower down somewhere in the 60 range or something like that, no issue with that. But I just think you're talking about, a run stopping, primarily like first, maybe second down player who's like a goal line specialist, short yardage specialist, nose tackle. And I just, man, it's a top 50 pick. I don't know. His RAS score was like barely 2. I think like we knew he's not an athlete. Like that's not why you're taking him, but it was worse, I think, than a lot of people expected.
No, I definitely agree. I don't think that I would take him or a player like that early. You just got to look at like on-field value. How much time are this going to be spent on the field? How many snaps are they going to take? And someone like that, they're very situational for how they're utilized. So spending that higher draft capital, I agree, it doesn't make sense. Now, like you said, though, this is day 2 guys that we're talking about with some of these visits. So maybe it is later, within that 3rd round. I don't know what they're going to do, but like I agree with you. At top 50. I wouldn't do that. I think there's other guys that are going to be there at other positions too that I think they're going to be really valuable. Also, he went to which high school did he go to? East or West? He went to East High, which is where High School Musical was filmed.
Oh, you're talking about Siaki Ika?
Yeah, he went to East High
all right.
in Salt Lake City, Utah, and which is where High School Musical was filmed.
All right, bring him in. I have no problem with
changes everything. It completely changes his draft board.
And then the receivers, very clearly, it's a slot guy. They've brought in 3 so far. I love 2 of them for sure. Charlie Jones would be fine, I think. But I love Jaden Reed out of Michigan State, and I love Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss. Very different styles. Jonathan Mingo is closer to that. He's not Chase Claypool size, but he's about 6'2", 225. I mean, that's a bigger slot option. Pretty diverse route tree. And Jaden Reed, man, he's got some burners. I love his body of work at Michigan State. I actually did a mock draft, like the very first one that I did a long time ago, and picked him in like the 6th round. Yeah, that's not happening. He's probably going to go like late day 2 at this point with his pre-draft process. So I would love either one of those 2 guys. I don't know. Mingo would probably have to be at 49. I think Reed might be at 80 potentially. But yeah, like very clearly, if the Steelers are going to draft a receiver, it's a guy that's going to be slot. And this is a good draft to need a slot receiver.
Yeah, and I think that's where the Steelers are needing a receiver when it comes to the needs of the team. You know, we talked about, was it last week, that Pat Freiermuth is essentially your slot receiver right now. So they don't really have a true slot receiver, and they haven't for a few years. I mean,
no tight ends on here, by the way.
We've experimented with it. You know, what are they get? They're gonna spend draft capital on a blocking tight end.
I mean, not necessarily like a. Here's my. I'm trying to make my case for this. Is Pat Freiermuth becomes your slot receiver. He might still be listed as a tight end. This guy is going to play inline, but also still run routes. And like, I don't get me wrong. Like, if Pat Freiermuth is part of the future, like that's great. I really like him as a receiver, but he's going to have 1 year left on his contract at that point after next season, and he's got a history of concussions. Like, I don't know. So, just a lot of things here that I can make a case for to get involved with the best draft class that we've seen come out in. At least since I've been like involved in actually watching guys come out of the draft.
All right. Well, let's take Dalton Kincaid at 17, and let's take Darnell Washington at 32.
Okay, hold on. No, actually, as much as I love Dalton Kincaid, I wouldn't take him just because he's the same thing.
He's a wide receiver.
It's a redundancy. Yeah, like he's also going to be a slot receiver in my opinion.
Yeah, him and Keithy, the 2 tight ends from Utah. It's so funny because they're just wide receivers, and you look at how they use the offense. They only throw to their tight ends as well, and so they are quite literally the wide receivers of the team. And I mean, Keithy, the ones that's still going to be at Utah this year, he's 6'2" and he's a tight end. You're telling me that he's a tight end, like an actual tight end? No, he's 6'2". He's a wide receiver. You just list him at tight end.
I don't know if you've seen this list, but the last thing I want to look at obviously is going to be the corners. Keely Ringo, Emmanuel Forbes, Tyreek Stevenson, Julius Brents, that's my guy. Joey Porter Jr., who doesn't count as one of the visits, being that he's an in-state player, and then Deonte Banks out of Maryland, who I also really like him too. Anything there stand out to you? I mentioned like Keely Ringo seems to me like you look at this pre-draft visit, they went to dinner with him. Pro day, went to dinner there. Like, there's been interest across the board so far with him through this process. Does anybody stand out there to you for better or for worse?
Keely Ringo does for worse compared to a couple of names you said, just because I would rather have a couple corners that are on that list.
He's the height, weight, speed guy that, like, man, you are really banking on being able to coach up. And like, the Steelers don't obviously have the best history there when it comes to corners. I will say, like, Terrell Austin wasn't in town before, with this history that we're talking about with developing these guys.
Yeah. No, he's just the one that I don't want to say scares me, but I'm just
high bust potential for sure.
Yeah, I'm just worried that the Steelers are going to take him and not pan out whenever there's other guys that I think are maybe they don't have necessarily as high as a ceiling as Keely Ringo could be just based on intangibles. But I think that they're going to be better football players from day one and more consistent and has the potential or a lower floor. But the one to me that I really like out of that list is Deonte Banks. I've been really considering like mocking him at 17 to the Steelers, especially because I feel like he's going to be one that's still there that'll be available, and I think it's a smart pick. I still there's more smoke around Joey Porter Jr. than there was Like you and I a month ago talked about like they have no interest, and now it's kind of changed a little bit.
I think they like him. I wouldn't rule him out at 17 by any means. I just don't think it's like literally the case where as everybody's making it, where it's like this is the guy at corner, perfect fit, all these other things. Like
We got that last year with Malik Willis, and it was not the
yeah,
case.
I think it's a similar thing. Like they're looking at that position, might not be that player.
Yeah, no, and then that's where to me that's why Deonte Banks fits in perfectly. I think he's a corner that you come in, and I think he can get significant playing time from game one.
Yeah, I think, man, Julius Brents is kind of becoming my guy in this class. Don't know how much you know about him. He might finish in my top 5 corners. Like I feel like he's gaining.
I know he goes
here.
to Kansas State.
Yeah,
I think to Kansas State.
I think he's gonna go like top 40 at this point. Like I think he could go very early on day 2. This is probably so I'm talking about a guy probably would have to be that 32, that first pick of the second round if you take him. But I think you look at the success like a guy like I'm not comparing them, across the board, but like Tariq Woolen had last year in Seattle, like Julius Brent's a 6'4" plus. Like he's hovering right at 6'5". He's just a massive corner. He would fit in perfectly. Like you could just drop him in Seattle back in the Legion of Boom days, and he would be perfect there. But yeah, to me, this is your press, like prototypical press man corner. Gets his hands on you right at the line of scrimmage. Very sticky. I think there's still some stuff to clean up. Takes a little bit grab. Like we talk about it all the time. Like anytime you talk about college corners and they don't have very many things to pick on, you're just gonna say they're a little bit grabby because they, like people were saying about Joey Porter Jr. The dude had 1 penalty last year and it was the first half of the first game. Like, so he was able to clean that up. But yeah, to me, Julius Brents is kind of becoming my guy through this process. So I'm very glad the Steelers have interest in him. If it is tackle at 17, a corner at 32, I like it would be him. Maybe Ringo's there at that point, maybe like a Tyreek Stevenson. But like if Julius Brents, you get him at 32, I don't even care what you did at 17, really. Okay, I don't.
Well,
okay, I care. Let me walk that one back because
yeah. No, I think that would be a good pick. He compared him to Tariq Woolen, and it's similar to the Tariq Woolen. I mean, there was several guys within the draft community that had some issues with Tariq Woolen, like things that he needed to work on. But look at the rookie season he ended up having.
Yeah.
I think that could work. And I personally, you said he's 6'4". I love tall corners. I love big corners.
I mean, look at Richard
forget
Sherman.
These little 5'10", 5'9" guys. I want this dude to be 6'5".
Well, what's funny is like 100% could see if there's one position the Steelers are going to double up on, to me it's corner, because you would get a boundary guy and then you look for somebody in the nickel and like it could be a total different type. It's gonna be a totally different type of player. I think then you're looking at like Clark Phillips out of Utah or like a Trevius Hodges Tomlinson out of TCU, who's 5'8". Like,
please give me Clark Phillips. Oh, like I said, I love that dude. I love him so much.
And I think like he's only 5'10", I think, right? Or like maybe even generously, but he's just like the tenacity in which he plays with it. It seems like he thinks he's like 6'1" at least.
Hilton was what, 5'0"?
Yeah, but my point is like Phillips though. Phillips was playing on the outside. Like he probably would play in the slot in the NFL, but like in a pinch, if he had to, I think he could survive on the boundary a little bit.
I think he could, and part of that is probably just how aggressively he plays the position. Like he may not have some of the traits that some of these outside corners do, but he's just going to beat the crap out of the wide receiver in front of him on the way down the field. So I think that's why he can make up for it. But if you want to double dip at corner and go and take like 2 within the first like 3 picks, because I imagine Phillips, I don't know if you're going to be able to wait till the Steelers' 4th pick.
Phillips would have to be 80, I think. Yeah, 3rd round
or 4th round. Yeah, that's what I meant, 4th round. So I think that within that range, I would be fine double dipping at corner. Because it's a need. It's a clear-cut need that the Steelers have. And while you should always draft like best player available, you also need to draft for your needs as well.
Who on the roster right now at corner is guaranteed to be back? Not this upcoming season, but the following one.
Now that Cam Sutton's gone, nobody.
No one. Like Patrick Peterson signed a 2-year contract, but it's really a 1 year. And if we like you and you still have it, you'll be back for year 2.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, they need it.
Yeah, if they're going to double dip in one area, to me, it's a corner, and it would be getting a boundary guy and a slot specific guy. Sign me up for Julius Brents and Clark Phillips, both those guys. Pick 32, pick 80. And then I don't care. No, I'm not going to say that.
And then you don't care what happens.